If someone told me that their kid was in fear every day of going to hell or being too scared to go down the street without his mum because he thinks he's going to get beaten up, don't know why I would think these things. The thought of, man, he was a little kid dealing with that, it does kind of break my heart now. My OCD, and I suffer with anxiety as well, so the two kind of thrive off each other. But I will get a thought in my head that I'll latch onto, and I obsess over it. And then the physical things will come from my compulsion, so you'll see me, I'll do this, and that's me, like, touch wood. But if I don't do that, I generally would think that this fear or thought could become real. So I was diagnosed, I'd say, about 7 years ago, maybe a bit longer, but I've had it probably all my life as far as I can remember. I didn't know what OCD was, and I don't think my parents necessarily did. You know, they don't necessarily know what's going on in my head, how long I'm obsessing over things. So, you know, I think I always kind of just thought they were habits. So when I got diagnosed officially, it did kind of help in the sense where it was like, okay, you're not crazy, you just have this illness that many, many people have.
And just tell us about how did this affect you growing up?
When I was a kid, I had the biggest fear of going to hell. And I was probably 5, 6, 7 years old, and I would obsess. Any little thing I did wrong, I would convince myself I'm going to hell. And I'd have to constantly ask my mum for reassurance, saying, Mum, I'm not going to go to hell, because I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. I was a bit naughty one day. Thinking of it now, I probably missed out on a lot of happiness just because I was being consumed by these thoughts of thinking I'm going to burn in hell. I would have days where I'm thinking about them all day. I'll have other little OCDs that I go over, and, you know, it's very time consuming. When you deal with a mental health problem, if you like, everything else in life I feel becomes easier. Being an MMA fighter, there's a lot of physical pain, and for me, that's nothing compared to mental pain. I would definitely say it's made me stronger. I think I've done so well because I obsessed so much about making this work. If I had a loss, I was straight back in the gym the next day. Not because I wanted to be there, but because I'm like, I need this to work. You know, I have no other plan B, if you like.
How does your OCD affect your training?
If I'm having a day where I'm pretty negative, down in the dumps, it can be very off-putting. You know, I might be on the gym trying to train and I'm just sitting there thinking, I haven't got cancer, have I? Or
But where does that come from?
I don't know. You know, I get in a cage and fight people. You know, I'm not necessarily scared about death, but for some reason, don't know where, no, luckily, touch wood, my family have never, I've not suffered with cancers. But there's something about a cancer which for me, it like latches on. You know, that's my biggest fear. But I also like to use my OCD to my advantage. So there'll be times where, today, for example, I didn't really want to train at 10 a.m. I've woke up, I'm quite tired, but I thought, if you don't go and train, you're not going to win your next fight. So because I've put that OCD into my head now, I'm like, right, if I don't go training, I know that I'm going to be obsessing over losing my next fight, so I have to go and train.
What about when you're in the cage and you're fighting? Does it affect you at all, or do you totally switch off, you're in the zone?
Nah, I'm switched off, I'm in the zone. Yeah. So that's why sometimes I've said to people that when I'm fighting, it's actually meditating for me, because the only thing that I've got to worry about is the guy in front that's trying to knock me out. Whereas when you're outside of the cage, you know, you're worrying about all these other things. And when I'm in there, that's my switch off mode. You know, that's when I can chill and just focus on the task at hand.
And just tell us about your support network, because you must have to have really understanding people around you.
My family are amazing. You know, I can't fault any of them. My coaching team's amazing. My wife's amazing, and everyone deals with my OCD and anxieties perfectly. I'm very blessed for that, because I always think, you know, if I didn't have them people around me and I was dealing with the stuff I don't know if I'd still be here today. But because I've got them people there, the people that can reassure me, the people that bring me back down to reality, that is everything. And, you know, just being able to talk to people, because once you kind of speak about your worries that you're dealing with mentally, it kind of eases up.
Obviously, you are a massive advocate for talking about mental health in general. How did that come about, and how do you kind of feel about that?
So I never felt the need to ever talk about it, and the reason being because I never wanted people to think that I was doing it for, like, clout. But I mentioned it once after a fight. I think the guy said, how did you get so ready? And I said, well, I deal with anxiety. So all I was thinking about was my opponent being this godlike character, and I had to train even harder for it. As soon as I started talking about it, my Instagram messages just flooded in with all positive things. You know, people saying how much it had helped them. You know, I had people saying to me that because they know an athlete like myself's dealing with a mental health problem like that, it made their chemotherapy easy. To me, this was crazy, you know, but my dad said, mate, if you can help one person in this life, you've done a good thing.
You've obviously spoken about kind of using your OCD to your advantage, almost like as a superpower. Do you think for some people it could be the opposite?
I can use it to my advantage because I obsess over perfecting things. You know, if I go to training and I get caught in a submission, I'll go home and I'm like, why did I get caught in that submission? And instead of just letting it go and not necessarily correcting the problem, I might obsess over it, which means I'm going to get better in that area, if that makes sense. So I imagine that for people in a team sport, I can imagine it being a lot harder because you can't dictate necessarily how the game goes. You know, you might have a great performance, but then the other team play awful and you lose. But luckily with me, it is just me in there. So that was something, when I started, I always knew as long as I train, as long as I go to the gym, as long as I do more than every other person is, I know that I'll eventually make it to where I want to be. So yeah, sometimes I have used it to my advantage and I think it can become an asset.
Do you think the world of sport supports people enough who have OCD?
I don't think so. I don't think people realise how paralysing it is. I know people know about OCD. Everyone, you always hear people mention OCD, but I don't think they realise how much of a dark place you can be. I've had times where if I didn't have the family, I think I could end my life. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so consuming and so paralysing. It's like being in a mental prison, if you like. You know, you feel trapped. And I've had it before where 2 weeks to 4 weeks where I'm in a bad way and I just can't stop obsessing. But I do know that it always passes, and that's to me what is that kind of light at the end of the tunnel now. I know that no matter how bad the little patch that I'm going through, I know it's going to pass, and I know that I'm going to be in a better place, and sometimes you just got to give it time, I think.